On the program is Kendra Tierney with her website, CatholicAllYear.com, CatholicAllYear.com, a wife, a mother, teaching, reading, writing, cooking, baking, sewing, crafting, party planning, graphic design, and remodeling. Wow. Anything, I don't know if you got any extra time there for anything else, but we are glad you are giving us a little time this morning. Welcome back to the show, Kendra Tierney.
Thanks so much for having me.
Praise be to God. It's hard to believe, actually, but Ash Wednesday is less than a month now. And we are. It's nigh upon us to have to prepare for the holy season of Lent. And we thought it would be a great idea to have you on the show to talk about how we might prepare as families, to prepare for the holy season of Lent. So let's start with, do you already have plans in place with T-minus less than 1 month?
Well, we do. I do. I definitely do. Lent is really late this year. So I feel like we've got this long period of ordinary time, and it's easy to kind of get complacent, but yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking earlier than usual about Lent because we have these subscription boxes, and we decided to do one this year that's for all 3 seasons, for Lent, Triduum, and Easter, so that people could get one box with all this stuff that they could use in their homes for the seasons. So I have been thinking, of course, the things in there that people will use first is Lent. So I have been full on Lent in my house for months, trying to prepare and prototype all of this stuff. It's funny, I have my kids practicing, making little crowns of thorns with toothpicks and, all these little projects and activities. So I've been thinking about it way more in advance than I usually would.
So you're probably tired of Lent already. You're like, I can't wait for Lent to be over. It's ridiculous.
I know. So I've got this month, to take a break from Lent and then start it up again.
A couple of years ago, my wife and I began to do things as a couple. And one of the things we do is we usually read a book, or we read through something. For instance, Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence was one that we worked through together as a couple. So what do you suggest for couples? I mean, what could some activities be that would be great, penances or activities they could do together to grow through their season of Lent?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and some liturgical living traditions that work really, well for couples are some of the traditional ones, like doing the Stations of the Cross. Those are traditionally done in a church, but but you can also do them at home, and I think that's really a devotion that sort of defines the season of Lent. There's no reason we can't do them all year long, but the Stations of the Cross are really. It's just really a beautiful way to sort of define the season. So whether you're doing it at home or you can go to a church together, once a week during Lent, specifically on Friday is when it's usually done. But to me, that's really sort of the devotion that most defines Lent. But then also to choose a voluntary Lenten devotion, a voluntary Lenten discipline that you can support each other on. If for something that you want to give up or take up together, and then you can sort of, hold each other accountable on that. I think that's helpful.
Now, when it comes to giving up, you said something a second ago that I caught my attention. Give up or take up. Taking up is something I've really worked on during the season of Lent over the last couple of decades. Is looking for those opportunities to grow there, and so reading new devotionals or whatever, going back through things like Trustful Surrender, or if it's the Consecration to Our Lady, St. Louis de Montfort, or whatever. But give up. Let's talk about give up. So should, how severe, where's the balance? I think a lot of times, speaking of myself, I'll come up with these grand ideas, and then they wane out, by, Ash Wednesday's over, and by Friday I've given up on all my, epic, penances. How do we set proper penance goals for the season of Lent?
Well, the sort of traditional fasting and food-based penances have sort of gone out of fashion over the past few decades. But those are the ones that are sort of the OG, practices of the Catholic Church. And So I really think that finding a way to incorporate that's going to, work for your temperament and your particular circumstances is, I think, a really good goal. That figuring out, maybe a Lenten fast for the whole season of Lent isn't going to work for you, but even that is generally pretty mild. That you could have one full meal a day that can contain meat, unless it's Friday, and 2 collations, which together aren't as much as a full meal. I mean, that's not really starving yourself to death. But so that's what traditional Catholic Lenten fasting would be. And then there are, during different periods of our faith, there were different, like, entire food groups that people would leave out and stuff. But that's what sort of the definition of fasting was. And so, but if that's not going to work, to have some sort of food-based penance, I really think is good, because, I don't know, for me anyway, when I give up sweets, which I have a real sweet tooth, and specifically Dr. Pepper. I really like Dr. Pepper, and I really suffer giving it up every year. But what I like is to prove to myself that I can live without it. And that's when I know, that we need to focus on these attachments, even to good things, even to not sinful things. But it's definitely an attachment, and I need to prove to myself that I can live without that thing. And so I make it through Lent without screen. Well, I shouldn't say totally screens, but without watching TV. And without having sweets and Dr. Pepper, and I can live through that. I can manage, and there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in being able to feel like these things that I really like, that I feel like are sort of a crutch for me. Yeah. That I can take this little chunk of time during the year and live without them.
Like I mentioned in the last segment about couples, I think it's very important, especially it's been important to my wife in particular, for me to kind of have a plan for us together as a couple. And that's something that probably needs to happen all year long, but in the season of Lent, we get very intentional about that. At least we have the last several years. What about the kids? So we talked about Stations of the Cross, which we do, praise be to God. What other activities would be a very good idea for families to incorporate the entire family in, to keep those penances in mind and to really keep ourselves focused during the entire season of Lent? Kendra, Tierney.
Something really small that has been really meaningful to us over many years is counting to 40 before we eat during Lent. And it's sort of a way to, to sort of mimic the intentionality of fasting, of just waiting a little bit longer before we eat. And, so everybody's sitting at the table, the food's in front of us, and we say grace, and then we count to 40 during Lent. And, like I said, it's a little thing, but it really, it feels meaningful, and it sets that season apart so that we remember. Another way is through some decor. We think about Christmas decorations, but I think it's really great, especially for stay-at-home moms and families with little kids that are around the house a lot, to have some sort of decoration in your house to remind you that it's Lent. And you can get little succulents, little cactuses. You can get a little crown of thorns type wreath and purple cloth or burlap cloth, and just make a little centerpiece of that. You can even just go outside and get some rocks and put them on some cloth, and but it's that visual reminder that it's Lent. Let's see, but I think both of those things can be really meaningful for little kids.
Kendra, I have a question. I just started a family with my wife, my beloved, and we have a 6-month-old baby. And one of the things that was surprising to me, not of our daughter, but of our relationship, is that it's very difficult to balance our duties and our prayer life at the same time while we're raising kids. And I just wanted to know, you being having a rather large family and really something that we look to and admire, how do you balance out your duties and your prayer life, especially as we come closer to this season of Lent?
I think that, again, it really is going to depend on people's personal temperament. For me, having the kids around is really what inspires me and motivates me to make sure that we as a family get to our, prayers and prayerful traditions and the Catholic devotions. And so, the fact that I'm going to be, the one sort of organizing things for the family is really what what keeps me motivated to remember our novenas or Stations of the Cross, and adding in some different prayers and things that we do around the dinner table, conversations about saints' lives. That's all really, to me, motivated by having my kids. That's older than 6 months, really, but that's coming because your kids are going to ask you questions and they're going to want to know. And to me, learning those things, to be able to answer their questions and wanting to introduce these concepts to them has been so motivational for me over my, parenting career. It can be harder, of course, to find personal time. I think especially, for moms who stay home with kids with young kids to find personal time. But, I think that there are always a few minutes in the day. It's just convincing yourself, to what you're going to use those few minutes a day on. But things like, audiobooks of great devotional books that I can put on while I'm doing something else. I have found that to be a good way to do it. Now that I have older kids who can help out with things, I'm able to have time to myself, first thing in the morning, early in the morning. And I find that that's the time that I can most count on to be able to have some time to myself.
Kendra, you having gone through, kids from little to older to everywhere in between, how do you see, in terms of Lent, of bringing children to start beginning to do more difficult Lenten practices? As children, you could always do little small things that are always appropriate for children, but when do you think it's appropriate to start doing bigger things like fasting and abstaining, those kind of larger penances? What would you say about how to approach that topic with your kids? The traditional sort of Catholic approach to that is to use what we call the age of reason, which is normally when kids would receive First Communion. So to us, we really have that sort of demarcation line between communicants and non-communicants. So if you don't receive Holy Communion, then then you're not in our family as bound by some of the Lenten fasting rules and disciplines. But really in our house, Lent looks different than the rest of the year for everyone. So our kids, we don't watch TV as a family. We don't eat treats as a family. And then kids choose their own specific Lenten disciplines of things that they want to give up or take up on their own. But those are things that we do as a family. We don't eat meat on Fridays year round, so they're used to that. And on the fasting days of Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, even the littlest kids, I'm not going to be a big stickler about it, but they know that it's a fasting day, and so we try to discourage snacking and things like that. See if they can wait until the meal time to be able to eat. But I think that if the whole family is really living Lent, then it's just something that the little kids are going to sort of, desire to be a part of, or at least be resigned to being a part of.
but it's just sort of a family culture thing.
Yeah, amen. What would you say is, maybe you need a second to think about this question, but what would you say is the one thing that people most often miss in their efforts during the holy season of Lent? I mean, I think of like giving up chocolate or whatever. It's like, I feel like sometimes we can go through these routines and then kind of miss the bigger picture of why we're giving up that chocolate or why we're taking on, a devotion or a particular practice or something like that. Do we do routines, or are we just going through the motions? What are we missing here, Kendra Tierney?
Well, I would say that for me, the biggest error that I remember sort of operating under was this idea that we should be miserable during Lent, that we should be suffering during Lent, that sort of is the goal, that we would be suffering. And I think that Jesus, clearly suffered during the Passion, but when we're thinking about, him going out into the desert, the goal of that wasn't to suffer. The goal of that was to remove himself from the distractions of daily life, and he didn't need to work on his attachments, but we do. And so this idea, like I said before, of focusing on attachments and not and if we need to take baby steps in order to make that happen, that's okay. And I remember when I was first trying to give up TV in the house, and it was just miserable. I couldn't get I had only little kids. We lived in this tiny 3-story house in Chicago with very squeaky stairs, and I couldn't get the kids to, be quiet and not wake the baby up while I was making dinner, because, they were used to being able to watch TV during that time, and it was snowy in Chicago, and finally I was like, we can't do this. It just isn't going to work for us. And it didn't work that year. But, the next year we tried again, and the next year we tried again. And finally, now we have been able to make that happen. And I know for me, giving myself little cheats, like of letting myself, giving up my favorite shows, but letting myself catch up on them on Sunday, watch one, to me was a way to sort of soften the difficulty of breaking those attachments. So to just find ways to help yourself be successful and to not make everybody else around you suffer. What's your goal on, say you did want to break your attachment to coffee. Is caffeine the issue? Like, is it worth going through the 3-day caffeine headache? Or could you, just take up black tea or something that's going to give you a little bit of the caffeine. Yeah. You don't have to make everybody around you quite as miserable, but you're still breaking that attachment. Just to think of like ways that you can be creative like that.
Yeah, amen. We have about a minute left with Kendra Tierney. Her website is CatholicAllYear.com. CatholicAllYear.com. So, did you say you're doing special subscription boxes?
Yeah, well, we have a monthly subscription box, but for Lent, Triduum, and Easter, we have this special, what we're calling a mega box. And I'm super excited about it. It's the traditions and the decorations and the activities that have been the most successful for my 10 kids over 20 years of figuring out what is going to motivate and inspire and help my family to really live these seasons. So it's called the seasonal mega box, if you want to look for it.
Seasonal mega box. Praise be to God. Well, CatholicAllYear.com. Check it out. Share it with friends and family. That'd be amazing. Kendra Tierney, we're very grateful to you. God bless you. God love you, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
All right. If we don't see you, have a great Lent as well. Hey, that is going to do it for the first hour of Catholic Drive Time. Praise be to God. We had a great hour. Thank you for joining us for that.